So we are on our way to try the new Defender versus the classic Land Rover Discovery 3. The Disco 3 has some advantages in form of 22-inch Range Rover rims with off-road tires, and it also got differential locking in the front and ARB differential locking. So this car is going to be compared to the car that's in our rear mirror, the Defender 110. It's not the most off-road capable version because it lacks the differential locking in the rear, but still it got a really nice tire. It's a winter tire without studs, so let's see what it ends up with. We start with a short chase on sand, and both cars really good on sand with those big tires. And then we have a small road through the forest. It's typically what the normal Defenders or Discovery does in Sweden. It's low speed driving on gravel road. It's a way of taking your equipment or whatever through the forest, and finally you might end up with a road that's closed or you can't go any longer, so you have a small off-road path to pass before you reach the main road. And here is a small ditch between the main road and the forest, so we are trying the axle articulation on both those cars. The suspension is quite similar. It's a little bit more robust on the Defender, but it's not a big difference. So you can see here how the axle moves. It's independent suspension all around, and the Defender loses its grip in the front axle on one tire a little bit, but it regains it thanks to the traction control in the car. When the Discovery comes, it hasn't engaged the locked differential in the front, so it has the same pattern as the Defender. A small spin on the left wheel, and then the traction control puts the power to the right wheel. Then we take the cars to a gravel pit. We're not doing any serious hill climbing here, but we are driving them still on sandy ground, and we have a quite steep field to climb, and then over the field we are passing different angles where the cars are leaning to the left or to the right, and both those cars has a good weight balance and low center of gravity, so they can stand even better leanings than this. And there's no problem with the traction on this when we are entering the fields, although it's grass fields, and the cars have a really nice front and rear approach angle, so you can go up a quite steep hill with a traction control giving you the traction to the ground. We still hasn't engaged the front differential locking on the Disco 3, and both the Disco 3 and the Defender has nice approach angles, as you can see. The Defender has a little bit better both approach and departure angle, but it's not a big difference, and both cars climbs very well here. After that we are reaching the top of the field and going down a slope down where there is a leaning to the left side and then a leaning to the right side, and both cars performs steady and really well even here. And still it's not a big difference between the Defender and the Disco 3. They are performing very equal, and even the feeling behind the steering wheel is really the same. The Defender has a 4-cylinder diesel engine with more horsepower than the Disco 3. That's one of the first Disco 3s with a V6, but in the off-roading they are performing very equal. There's a small difference between the Defender and the Disco 3 because the Defender has a little bit longer wheelbase in this version. It's the 110. There's a Defender 90 with a shorter wheelbase, and that one is a little bit more off-road capable in the most situations. So the wheelbase is always a balance between comfort and load capacity and such things, and off-road ability. So here comes the disco free. It's still typically for what the users in Sweden have to do with their cars. It's forest driving, it's hill climbing, it's more or less very close to a road. It has been a road here. It's there are tracks and everything, so it's still a legal place to go off-roading. There are still tracks that takes us over the hill, and here you can see the individual suspension that differs the Land Rovers from the competitors like Wrangler, Mercedes G-Class, Toyota, Land Cruiser. It's an advantage with individual suspension, both front and rear, in off-roading and in comfort, even though it's not supposed to be as durable as a live axle. You also have the differential housing on the axle a little bit higher. That gives you a better ground clearance, as you can see here, where the Defender climbs over a little bit of a, there has been a tree, there's a little bit of a tree, and the same here with the Disco Free. They climbs very nicely over this thanks to the traction control, the high ground clearance, and the individual suspension, as you can see here on the Disco Free. This is typically what you have to do, and what we do in Sweden also is you do the off-roading calm and steady, not to damage the ground beneath the cars. Going downhill with both the Defender and the Disco Free is really easy. You have the hill descent control that makes it easy for the driver to adopt the speed with the brake and the speed and the accelerator, so you can have the speed you want down the hill, and you don't need to use the brakes if you don't want to change the speed. The car is steady downhill, and even here is the approach angle and the departure angle of importance. I mean, if you compare this to many of our pickup trucks, we have like the most of them, like the Toyota, like the Volkswagen Amarok. The most pickup trucks has not this great departure angle, and they often have a tow hook in the rear, so they got stuck in the situation we are on here. If you see here where the Defender goes up to a steep sandy hill, steady, easy, and without the tow hook hitching the ground, thanks to its electrically removed from the rear, and on the Disco it's taken away. It's a detachable tow hook. But here is one of the main advantages with the departure angle of both vehicles. So, being a hunter or a forest man in Sweden, you might have to leave the road if there is some work to do or whatever. So we try the Defender here on a bit rocky parking place side of the road. It climbs also very well here. There is no problem. The individual suspension and the high ground clearance helps you to get through, and also the traction control helps you to get grip all the way, even if there is less weight on one wheel on an axle. The automatic traction control helps you. Now we have a Defender from 1989. It's according to the owner and driver of Defender, the last really real Defender. It has a mechanical diesel pump. It has a 4-cylinder diesel engine, and it has those classical what we call analog air condition, the small openings below the windscreen in the front instead of traditional or modern air conditioning. We couldn't really find any place where the old Defender was better or worse than the new Defender. Here in the forest driving, the forest driving is a little bit more challenging because there are parts where there is a deep hole. There can be a stone, there can be fallen parts from trees and so on. So you need to be cautious driving on that ground. But thanks to the Defender's protection plates beneath the body, and of course the high ground clearance and the individual suspension, even if it's a beautiful looking, well designed and expensive car, it's still capable of doing this type of driving without damaging the car and without losing the grip. You can easily go in on those on those forest roads where there normally has been only forest vehicles. And we do the same thing with the 110 from 1989. And what do you think about the look? It's really a subjective decision which one you think is most beautiful. There is no chance to call the normal Defender other than it's an iconic vehicle, and it's the Land Rover for the Land Rovers. Nothing else is a Land Rover. Disco isn't a Land Rover. Freelander or Range Rover or anything isn't a Land Rover. So for the true Land Rover enthusiast, this is the Land Rover. It has to have those openings before below the windscreen. But still, it doesn't outperform the new Defender in any of those cases where we tried them. I mean, the new Defender, although it's a very good looking and very expensive and a very advanced vehicle, hasn't been let down in this really tough circumstances for a normal off-roader. On the other hand, you still got the same off-roading capabilities with a car that's like 30 years old. So what to say, the Defender from 1989 is a great construction. But on the other hand, the new Defender is a far better compromise between comfort and off-road capability. Do you think it's stuck here? Well, it isn't. The axle articulation of the Defender 110 is really good, and it compensates for the lack of individual suspension. So it's a little bit, I mean, mentally, it doesn't hurt you that much if you get grounded in the classic Defender. It's sturdy built, it's live axles, and the most repairing you have to do on the car is easily done in the field. If you hit anything too hard with a new Defender, it could be very expensive to make a repair. You have to tow it to the repair shop and so on. There's not very much you can do with the car yourself, but the traditional Defender is much easier to work with. I mean, if you go for driving in a remote place and you have to rely on yourself to take care of you and your car, and to really care for the car to take you out of the forest or down from the hills or down from the snow or wherever you are, the traditional Defender gives you as an owner and mildly experienced mechanic the possibility to save the situation if anything goes wrong. But as I said, the new Defender surprised us with its off-road capability, and that you can see here how the rear axle articulates a lot, and that's thanks to the coil spring and the long traveling suspension on both sides. So the Defender 110 with coil spring is a really capable off-roader, although it lacks differential lockings in both axles. It's still capable in these situations. So there are situations where the new Defender, thanks to the differential locking in the rear axle, is better, and that could be very slippery uphill. It could be towing a very heavy trailer or something like that. But in this situation, where the ground is uneven and there is more or less stones and small parts from trees and so on to climb on. The main difference between the traditional Defender is the interior and of course the exterior. It's a complete new vehicle that Land Rover has given us with a new Defender. As you can see, there's a huge difference, both exterior and interior. What you like or what you prefer, it's all up to you. Both cars are capable of fording, but the new Defender is a little bit better in fording. It's you can ford in a deep of up to 90 centimeters. And you also got this fancy electronic help to find out when it's too deep. You have in the computer in the car in the middle screen where you can see how deep the car is for the moment, the blue line, and how much you have before you reach the deepest the car can ford. Here it comes to a little bit too steep angle, and then it couldn't indicate.